Welcome back everyone, once again to another truck request video. Today is going to be the mighty ANK Mk 38 and also the Mk 38 Civilian, because why not? They're basically very similar. They're almost identical. There is some differences between them with weights, add-ons and such, but they are most likely very similar. So we're going to touch on both these vehicles here today. And if you guys could, please give me a comment in the comment section on what base game truck that you would like to see next in the series, and the most upvoted comment will be the one we feature on the next video. Now keep in mind there is a pinned comment from myself down in the comment section showing what vehicles we've already covered from the base game. So please reference that before you cast your vote, and keep voting. Keep hitting the like button and keep hitting the hype button there on the video. It helps the channel grow, and if you want to see the channel grow, please do so. It helps a lot and I really appreciate it. If not, thank you for being here. Now, let's talk about the ANK Mk 38. If you'd like to see the review on this, I actually have the review on it. And I didn't review the Mk 38 Civilian because essentially it's the same thing just with add-ons. So yeah, I just kind of left it there. Now, the ANK Mk 38 here essentially has one add-on. You see there's no add-on section. We'll cover that right now off the rip. It has a 2-slot sideboard bed. It has a pretty good engine here that is a little bit thirsty, but it has 210,000 torque. Its power to weight is actually pretty good. So having always on all-wheel drive and diff lock with mud tires and or some tires I'm going to show you, you can get some pretty good paces. Now you see I have the high range gearbox on here, and this is because I'm trying to mitigate something. I'm trying to travel at fast speeds to get to a location and potentially get there before I burn a lot of fuel, because your fuel burn is based upon fuel burn per minute, right? But if I can get to a place very quickly, I'm not going to burn as much fuel. That's the kind of the logic there. The high range gearbox has a 30% all-wheel drive penalty. The off-road's a 40, 60, and I think this may be a 20 or 30. So having always on all-wheel drive, you are stuck with whatever all-wheel drive penalty that you choose from these gearbox ranges all the time. It doesn't matter if you're in idle. So it would behoove you to try to travel quickly with this because you don't have much uptime, being that you have 53 gallons or 200 liters of fuel. And that is kind of my logic here. But in some areas where I don't feel like I can really crack high range open, I tend to downgrade to the off-road because of just the safety of travel and stuff like that. And also you need to consider the vehicle's stability in itself. I checked its center of gravities. I'm not too concerned with them, but the vehicle itself is not notably stable. It has a center of gravity right here in its cab, and then it also has one down here in the chassis. Not something that's outlandish. I've seen a lot of these, and in other cases, the vehicles have been very stable, but this one, it's kind of odd because it's really not. And you can see I have the big balloon tires on here to help with some stability. And there's also another reason I have these AMHS ones on here as well. We'll talk about that in a second. Active suspension, this is for two reasons. I actually think that you should be using the active suspension because one, you can actually lower your CG by actually decreasing it when you want to maintain balance. Or if you want more ground clearance through a muddy surface, you can actually stop and then just jack this thing up real quick and have more ground clearance. That is the move that I would take. Instead of using like the Tune Custom or something like that, I would just take the active suspension. So you can kind of crouch when you want to keep your CGs lower, because we just talked about its center of gravities and it not being notably stable. So those are just ways to play, kind of cerebral ways to think about how to effectively use the ANK. Moving on to tires here, it has 100 kilo weight tires, which are essentially medium weight tires, but there is a catch. It has two of its sets of tires have different rear mass scaling, and you're probably wondering what am I talking about here. A rear mass scale means that essentially these tires here, which are the ANKO and also its AMHS tire, so it's balloon tires and also these native tires that it does get, they act as if they are a double tire in weight. So this is a 200 kilo tire, this is a 200 kilo tire, but in the front, these are 100 kilo tires still. I'm not sure why they just didn't make all of these 200, but hey, we'll take it. More weight in the rear with the rear mass scaling is a good thing. So normally, if these were just medium weight tires and had no rear mass scale, this would be 100 kilos and 100 kilos. But now, because it has rear mass scaling, you get the stiffened suspension in the back, and it allows you to hold weight and not collapse as much. So that's a good thing. So you have, in my opinion, two options that are really good to use, because the AMHS tire is not like other AMHS tires that are on other trucks, like the Action, the Warthog and such. These also have rear mass scale in the rear, giving them 200 weights in the rear tires. In my opinion, I think there's two ways to play this truck. If you're good at holding its stability, ANKOs, because you're going to have crazy good performance in mud because, well, narrow tires do a lot better unless you're grounding your frame out. If you're going through really, really thick conditions and you're going really, really slow, AMHS, or also you want to maintain more stability, it's going to be the AMHS. And that's essentially how I would set up the ANK if I were to run it. Now, let's move on to the ANK Civilian. The ANK Civilian is pretty much I don't want to say a carbon copy, but it's very, very similar to the other one. And the only thing that it really changes about this, and I'm going to talk about it, is it just has a few more add-ons. There was a rumor that Sabre made the ANK Mk 38 Civilian because at the time, if they changed the add-ons on the normal Mark 38, that it was going to break the game. I don't know if that's a true statement or not. That was just a rumor. So please don't take that as a fact. It's just a rumor that went around. I have no clue, to be honest, but that was just a rumor. But this truck here is essentially very similar to it, and it has high saddle, low saddle, fire tank, fuel tank, and a van body add-on. So there's more things that you can do with the ANK Civilian, but you don't have the ANK bed, the 2-slot bed, like the normal ANK. So there's a couple things that are different. I personally love to use the ANK Civilian as you guys know, low saddle. I wish it did have a crane, but the thing is, giving it a crane would also induce a little bit more cab sway, and you would have to monitor its stability even further because it would probably get the American crane, small crane, I would say. And then, yes, you would have a lot of sway back and forth, and having 100 kilo tires on the front, it would compress a lot of this down farther in the front. But that is the ANK Mark 38 Civilian and the Mark 38. Let's move on here to the driving portion. I'm going to talk about how I felt about the ANK Mark 38 when I first started and how I feel about it now. Now, you guys pretty much know where I put it on a tier list, but we'll talk about how I felt then and how I do feel now and moving forward. Going back to my first playthrough in 2020, going to Alaska, essentially with stronger trucks, let's be honest, and then going to Pedro Bay where it's kind of off the beaten path. It's a rather small map, but there is some rugged areas over there. Especially as a new player, you kind of feel that way, but nowadays, not so much. And then you go to the northeast part of Pedro Bay, and then you roll up on this monster of a truck. And you're like, what in the world have I rolled up on? And I actually did like a panning motion where I kind of surveyed it and kind of like scanned it real quick with the camera. And I was like, wait a second, I've seen this before. There's actually a gentleman that lives about 10 minutes from me who has 3 of these lined up in his driveway. I kid you not. They're like right on the side of his garage. I don't know why he has them. He just does. If I ever drive by there going to my mom's house, I'll try to take a picture if I'm driving probably in the passenger seat with my wife, but it's crazy. So I was like, let's jump in here. Let's drive around, do some missions while we're in Pedro Bay. While we're here, let's use it. I jumped in. I was like, oh, cool. Always on all-wheel drive. That's like my favorite thing in the world. At the time, I do think it's really advantageous still. It's just nowadays I like the switchable, I think, things, but that's just kind of like a personal preference. So I was like, okay, cool. It has only 53 gallons, but that's not too bad. Drives really well. It sounds great. That roaring engine the ANK has, all good things. After a while, I was like, what can I do with it other than just 2-slot sideboard bed? Took it back to the garage, find out that there are no add-ons for the ANK at all. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to go back to using what I was using. I really can't use this for much other than these 2-slot hauls and hauling a hitch trailer behind you. And hauling a hitch trailer behind you, if you don't have any weight in your bed, is not really advantageous. So then came the ANK Civilian, which kind of gave us a little bit more versatility, which I believe off-road, heavy-duty, and highway trucks should have. They should have, maybe not versatility, they should have add-on capabilities. But let's be real, not every vehicle that has massive amount of add-ons is actually versatile. The vehicle itself has to be able to support the add-on that it's actually attaching and be able to perform in that arena. The ANK, I think, can do that with its new add-ons with the Civilian. It just might be a little bit difficult in some ways, especially concerning with balance. But with the reduction in fuel weights on fuel tanks, I think this will be a lot better. Ways that I think that ANK could get better is maybe unlocking its all-wheel drive, a potential fuel bump, giving it some more fuel, and maybe a couple more add-ons for the ANK Civilian or just the ANK Mk normal truck to make it potentially more versatile. Now, thinking about where I stack it up with other trucks, if you looked at my recent tier list, it basically sits around mid-tier. I think if it had a stability change, maybe a little bit more fuel, maybe not as much fuel burn, and it was more trustworthy with all those things, and then you add in some add-ons, it probably would sit a lot higher on the tier list. But because you can't really utilize it for much other than being a support vehicle and 2-slot hauls, maybe you can do it with low saddle. But the thing is, I'm a crane user. I think even adding the small crane to either both of them would be a good idea. Yeah, we talked about how the small crane would add weight to the front of the vehicle, potentially collapse its suspension, and also make it even more unbalanced than it already is. But I'm going to take that chance because I'm going to pull a semi-trailer with the ANK Mk Civilian, create angles, and also use my crane for counterbalances, being able to push myself out of stuff, and other things that add-on is just really good for. It's potentially the best add-on that you can have in the game. Nowadays, I don't leave home without it. Before, I would always see if it decreased my power to weight. I would say, no, I'm not going to use it. I'll just auto load. But the thing is, there's times where you tip over, but you don't really lose your engine, but you lose your cargo. And if you lose your cargo without a crane, you have to come get support. And that's really how I feel about using the ANK with a low saddle. Because if I use it with a low saddle and something like that occurs, I'm kind of dead in the water. I have to go get another truck, bring him over to the ANK, crane all that stuff back in, and then he goes on his merry way until the next occurrence. And that's not really something I want to do. I want to be able to make my time efficient, and I think the small crane is the best bet for that. So moving forward here into 2026 and also into 2027 Q1 when the year 5 pass concludes, how does the ANK still stack up? Well, I think it's going to still be a B tier truck unless Sabre does some adjustments to it, because the new vehicles they're starting to come out with are absolutely, well, they're crazy. And the old trucks, even though the ANK does have a decent collision mesh, they're just not on the same level as these new trucks. So with that being said, it's going to stick around mid-tier. It still has a special place in my heart because it is a base game vehicle, and it still gives me that nostalgic feeling when I first fired it up, and I still fire it up today. I kind of remember that feeling of finding this, thinking back like, hey, wow, this is going to be great. But anyways, that is all I have for you guys today. Please give a like to the channel, hit the hype button. Also go cast a vote for your next base game truck that you would like to see, and the most upvoted will be the one we do on the next video. Hope you guys really enjoyed this and potentially learned a few things along the way as well. So until next time, God bless and stay upright.